Now, let's go first off to the front of the Courier Mail. As a former newspaper editor, I love a good front page headline. And I know, Scotty, you've been in newspapers most of your life. You do too. And this is a beauty. Virgin's Hail Mary plan to keep embattled Queensland airline fly. Virgin Australia collapsed last night under a $5 billion debt bomb after frantic negotiations failed to secure an 11th hour buyout. Accounting powerhouse Deloitte has been appointed administrator to try to save Australia's second largest airline as more than 10,000 jobs hang in limbo. Well, of course, Scott, we do know that Virgin Airlines was struggling prior to the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. The coronavirus pandemic clearly the final nail in the coffin. But, gee, I hope that we can somehow save this airline because I don't like the prospects of Australia being a one airline, a monopoly aviation country.
Yeah, you're right, Gleeson. Look, I was talking to Paul Scurr a couple of weeks ago, the CEO of Virgin. That was his whole argument. They said if you don't have Virgin there, Qantas has got a monopoly. Now, the federal government has a slightly different view about that. Their view is that the market should play its role in this. But it's sad to see what's happened today. But others will be arguing quite rightly that Virgin going into voluntary administration with the $5 billion of debt, this is the best way for it to be restructured, new investment to come in and it survive. And it's so important. 10,000 jobs, direct jobs from Virgin, another 6,000 indirect jobs from Virgin. It's important that there's some sort of airline that comes out of this, just in terms of the livelihood of so many people out there.
Well, Scott, I think also it's so important for regional tourism and for regional air routes. And we're going to go to the front of the Gold Coast Bulletin now. They've actually got a really good front page tomorrow as well. And, of course, we'll get to the Joe Exotic angle shortly. But as far as Virgin is concerned, Virgin is such an important player in the Queensland tourism landscape. Virgin no longer. Major airlines collapse sends shockwaves through the Gold Coast tourism sector. Gold Coast leaders say the city will have to overhaul its entire tourism strategy in the wake of Virgin Australia being put into voluntary administration last night, drowning in debt worth more than $5 billion. And, of course, we saw today's Courier Mail, former Premier Peter Beattie, who brokered the deal 19 years ago to bring Virgin to Queensland, stressing the importance of Virgin to domestic and regional tourism in this country.
I can remember so well the launch of Virgin. I was on a flight with Richard Branson almost 20 years ago when he first launched it here.
Wow.
And it is so important to the tourism sector here, regional tourism. Look, they've got a lot of problems at the moment. What they don't need is coming out of this, and we are coming out of the COVID crisis, is they need to have planes there to get bums on seats and get them to the regional areas. Absolutely.
And if we're going to do some plain talking, let's go to the front of the Australian, of course, Australia's preeminent broadsheet, ailing Virgin's crash landing, airline in administration, late plea for $100 million taxpayer bailout rejected, and airfare price rises feared. Virgin Australia has been put into voluntary administration after the Morrison government rejected an 11th hour appeal for a $100 million grant to keep it afloat for another 2 weeks as private equity firms circle the airline. A board meeting of international shareholders late on Monday signed off on the move to put the company into administration in the wake of coronavirus travel restrictions, shutting down the airline and there being no prospect of a government bailout. Now, of course, we know that there are moves afoot, and we will get to the front of the Herald Sun shortly where it says there are moves afoot behind the scenes to try and rescue the airline. But my big concern, as I said earlier, Scott, is that customers, passengers, will be price gouged if Qantas is doing it on their own.
Yeah, people have to remember, Gleeson, that one of the reasons Virgin's got into these issues is probably about 10 years or so ago, they decided to take on Qantas and go for the upper end of the market. Originally, they came in with Virgin Blue as very much the lower end of the market. They decided to take them on. That's caused the $5 billion of debt. But what it's also done is keep prices down. And it wasn't that many years ago when it was just a incredible cost to fly from one city to another in Australia. Along the east coast there, you know, you're close to $1,000 just for a normal flight. It's important we have competition. whether it's Virgin or some sort of Virgin Mark II that we get, it will be important to have that competition moving forward just for the general economy, but also for the airline passengers out there, so they aren't price gouged by Qantas having basically a monopoly.
All right, the Herald Sun, Virgin on collapse. Now, the Herald Sun says that Virgin Australia will go into voluntary administration with an announcement on the future of the beleaguered airline expected as early as today. Melbourne, this is the interesting bit here, mate. Melbourne private equity firm BGH Capital has emerged as a strong contender to take over the business as markets brace for the collapse of Virgin this morning. Sources close to the company say senior figures had been locked in meetings all day yesterday but were unable to find a solution to keep the company afloat in its current form. That's an interesting second part there. BGH Capital has emerged as a strong contender to take over the business. Now, apparently they've been looking at the books for some weeks, Scott.
Yeah, look, and what's interesting, of course, is that they're looking at them, but a lot of the major investors already, existing investors in Virgin, haven't been willing to cough up more money. Richard Branson has got 10%, 20% of the business. He's not willing to put more money in. Some of the other investors aren't willing to put more money in. So you're probably likely to see some other player come in. It might be this group, it might be another. What it won't be probably is a Chinese airline. They might want to do it, but I think there'll be some reluctance out there to let the Chinese come in and pick up Virgin.